So welcome back to another Perils in Paradise card review. Today we got 9 new warrior cards. Remember, this one got revealed previously, the Rye Cleaver. We've also got the new legendary here, Ham the Hungry. You can tell there's going to be a food theme on this one. Ham is a 6-mana 3/3. He's the Druid Tourist, so adding this to your deck lets you run Druid cards from Perils in Paradise, minus their Tourist. He's also got Taunt, and at the end of your turn, eat a minion in the enemy's deck to gain +2/+2. So really meager stat gain there. That only makes this a 6-mana 5/5, which is of course a really weak onboard play for turn 6. Not super excited to actually like put this card into play in a given game. We've had this debate 1,000 times throughout the years, but eating a card in your opponent's deck is not actually really impactful. You didn't really do anything at all, because some games, yes, you'll hit a crazy high roll and eat their awesome Zilliax or whatever. Other games, you'll eat a 1-drop and draw them into their awesome Zilliax. So there will be moments it feels good and moments it feels absolutely awful, but on average it kind of does nothing other than give you +2/+2, unless we have a lot of games going to fatigue, and then of course eating resources out of their deck does accelerate them towards fatigue. That's possible in Priest. It's possible if, like, Priest versus Warrior matchups start happening or something, but in most games it's just not going to matter that you ate something out of their deck. So that makes this really weak to actually spend 6 mana on. Now, that said, there are a few, scenarios where, because this is hitting a minion specifically, if you're running like against a combo deck that has a few key select minions, you have a decent chance there for this to be a tech card of sorts against those matchups where they have to have their Sif in order to win the game. And if they don't have Sif, they can't win the game. And this gives you a roll basically on deleting that Sif. Most decks can afford to lose any given minion, but there are those few select decks that can't afford to lose specific minions. Ham does have some tech card utility there, but it's really iffy, really limited. Anything in hand, of course, is not even a try for Ham. So super limited onboard impact. Now, that said, it's the Druid Tourist. We all know Druid's going to get some broken cards. They always do. So Ham giving you access to broken Druid cards means this is probably actually going to get played, and maybe played a lot as well. We also saw some Taunt synergy stuff in Druid with the location that was teased, like adding Taunt cards to your hand. So some kind of Taunt package, and maybe a Taunt hand buff package based on what we're going to see here in Warrior today. It does give Ham a little bit of an extra edge. If he's getting hand buffed and stuff, he won't feel as bad on board. That said, there's still an opportunity cost to overcome. You could have played a different 6-drop that was more impactful on board. So I just really am not in love with Ham's text here, minus the Druid Tourist part, which seems like this is probably going to bolster this card a ton and will probably get played. He might just sit in hand fairly often, or people will play him too much while trying to fish for this crazy minion eating that's usually pointless. In theory, if he lives for multiple turns, if you keep him alive a lot or create copies, there's a world where you burn through your opponent's deck into fatigue faster, but super unlikely as such a small minion. So ultimately, this one I think I love only for the Druid Tourist aspect. Moving on here to Line Cook. This is a 3-mana 2/4. It's got tradable and Taunt, and when you draw this, get a copy of it, which I think that's actually pretty nice. I think tradable always adds something so nice to any given card. It adds that real flexibility, and in this case, it's also just a lot of value. Sometimes you feel bad trading something off because you lose that value in hand, but in this case, since you're getting a copy of it when you draw it, you're getting to retain some of that value in hand. You're getting to keep that resource. You can weave this 3 mana in as needed. You can trade off the the non-copy, or whichever one, and you still get to use the utility of the card draw. So, got that extra mana floating around for a trade. That's nice while still preserving your hand. Also note, you can just trade both of them as needed. So it just gives you extra card draw flexibility off of the tradable as well. We've also got hand buff stuff that can come into play with a card like Line Cook. I guess we'll go ahead and show some of the hand buff here. Cup of Muscle. This is a new drink for Warrior. Give a minion in your hand +2/+1. These are single targeted random hand buffs, so they don't go quite as far as stuff like Paladin, but we did also see, don't I have this pulled up? Yeah, Ranger Gilly Means we could see some of this stuff pop into Hunter as well, and this got a nice little hand buff support package as well. And like this card's a beast too, so there's like a couple crossovers there for Hunter. I guess I'll show the Monstrosity too, another card that does benefit from increased stats in this case. So a little bit of a hand buff package coming together, also with some taunts too, like we talked about for Druid. So this can kind of go both ways. Like these warrior cards might be good in Hunter, and some Druid cards might come in to support some of these warrior taunt cards as well. But ultimately, I think Line Cook is just like nice. It's warrior is a class that can just often look for flexible ways to spend mana. They're getting into their late game removal. They're getting into their late game threats and bombs. They need stuff to do early, just kind of get by. Tradable provides that. Little taunt bodies like this provide that. And keeping your hand, full of taunts and active hand buff targets might be a good upside too. So I think Line Cook's actually pretty cool. Moving on to the Uncooked Calamari. This is a 4-mana 3/4 beast. Battle cry: destroy an enemy minion with attack less than or equal to this minion's. And yeah, this just looks like really good single target removal on a stick. Like that's just a good solid card as far as I'm concerned. This, of course, as we know, scales really well with any hand buffs, any stat additions. When this gets hit by your cup of muscle, suddenly you can clear 5 attack stuff with it. But frankly, I don't think you have to. I think sometimes just playing this on 4 and hitting a 3/3 is gonna feel okay. To just swing the board just to keep up, get a body down, trade into another 3/3 or 2, right? That's gonna feel like a solid play in a lot of scenarios. But also, even at a base level, there are some bigger targets you can hit with this as well. I was looking like a few of the Titans, have 3 attack, basically, like Aman'Thul for Priest. Delete their Aman'Thul with your Undercooked Calamari. That's gonna feel like a really strong play. So I think actually pretty solid at a baseline, good in the early game, some late game potential still as well. And then anytime you start giving this extra stats in hand, obviously that ability to scale up and kill bigger and bigger things also does feel really useful for this one. I will note one thing. This doesn't have Taunt, which I do think limits the hand buff upside of it a little bit, in Warrior, I guess, anyway, because really the best hand buff cards in Warrior are probably Detonation Juggernaut, give Taunt minions in your hand, +2/+2, and the unlucky Powderman, give Taunt minions in your hand and deck +1/+1. So some of these other cards, like the Line Cook and the Monstrosity, which we're going to take a look at here in a second, these do tend to benefit more from the best kind of taunt hand buff stuff that Warrior currently has access to. So Calamari might get a little bit stranded in that case. Like if you're running a deck that's all in on that, it's a little bit harder for Calamari to get those bonus stats. We did talk about the drink, but beyond that, might struggle a little bit to keep up with its peers in that case. I mean, there is stuff, like Smelt we've seen before, give a random minion +3/+3 as well. There's a few ways to get to this, but all of those are random minions in hand. So kind of hard to work with Calamari specifically. Oh, and I didn't mention Hunter for this, but all the same reasons I like this in Warrior, I like it in Hunter. The one big difference, I guess, is that Hunter tends to play a little faster than Warrior, going out for aggression and tempo more often. They have some slower decks in the Highlander world, so this could have a hard time fitting in a more proactive, aggressive deck as opposed to a more like defensive deck. But at the same time, it's so swingy. I think it's actually still pretty good in like a Highlander Hunter package, for instance. I see it fitting rather well. Moving on to the Monstrosity. This is a big old 9-mana 6/9 elemental. It's got Taunt, and at the end of your turn, summon an elemental with stats equal to this minion's, which we just talked about all the Taunt hand buff that Warrior does still have access to in Standard, which is obviously really nice for this card. As you buff these stats, you're getting to duplicate them here with this end of turn summon, and God forbid it lives multiple turns. Like that's going to be, a big old monster pile of stats. I think, if you play this guy and he lives to the end of the turn, you're probably winning the game anyway. You may not need him to keep snowballing with extra bodies over and over again, but it feels like it certainly close out the game anyway. So that's it's a good problem to have anyway. But this gets +2/+2, +3/+3. You're looking at some absolutely monster threats, right? You're developing like almost 20 power and attack on board all at once. You put it as an answer, that's just going to be lethal counter swings so very often for this one. I also want to note that this being an elemental and our previous card being a beast, and you know, there's some good hand buff stuff already in Warrior that fits into certainly different minion types. You know, we got the Blast Tortoise is a great taunt hand buff target beast. This is a great taunt hand buff target elemental. We've got like Ziliax, can be a great taunt hand buff target mech. Does matter for another card we're going to look at here, which is the all you can eat. Draw 3 minions of different minion types. So this is a great way to kind of fill your hands for all of those big buffed taunts. Don't forget, we also do have Voon still in Warrior that like duplicates cards of different types in your hand, which means you can get like extra big buffed monstrosities. So in essence, I just wanted to call out the fact that the minion type on this might actually matter for a Menagerie Warrior, which, you know, could be taunt based, could be otherwise. We have still a pretty good Menagerie Warrior package from Festival of Legends, some of that like stuff that scales with Menagerie. You know, there's the one amalgam band, those sorts of things. You know, that kind of deck and package has existed before, and cards like this could come along to fuel it. Now, all that said, this is a 9 mana card, and that is really my biggest concern for this one. It's just really hard to play big dumb stats on turn 9, even if they're really, really big dumb stats. There's just great universal removal out there in the world of Hearthstone, or often this is just kind of too late to stabilize behind. So do you need some mechanism to cheat this into play, particularly like Hunter? Forget about it. This seems so expensive for Hunter. But for Warrior, do you need a faster way to get this in? Warrior has gotten some ways to cheat big stuff into play. There's like, I think, Chemical Spill that came out last set that you know, like deals 5 damage to a minion after summoning it, like your highest cost minion, but that's not good for this one. You don't want it to take that damage. So I don't know, that's kind of awkward. That's the real hesitation around Monstrosity. It's a big old pile of stuff, that's nice, but how far can that go when it costs this freaking much? So moving on to a Cup of Muscle. This is that 1 mana drink. Give a minion in your hand +2/+1 and 3 drinks left. So all in all, you know, this is kind of 3 mana +6/+3. This one's really tough for me to assess. I think it's actually okay because it is just so cheap. It's not often all that hard to weave in, you know, a 1 mana spell. But at the same time, I don't think you want the payoff for this one taking too long. I also will note that the payoff for this one is more attack focused than defense focused. So, you know, for your Monstrosity, for instance, not a good target. It's going to take forever to pay off this 1 mana commitment you made. You're going to want this in like a more aggressive package, or not even necessarily aggressive, but just a lower cost package. Basically for the Cup of Muscle, which does fit really nicely for the Uncooked Calamari, because this one, of course, you want the attack to scale up. But I'm just saying, like, there's almost 2 different routes you kind of see happening here for this hand buff stuff. You see a big defensive taunt route, and you see a slightly faster kind of Cup of Muscle Undercooked Calamari route. Now, the issue is I don't know that this route has enough support necessarily to get over the hump. I think Calamari is an independently good card, but does it need Cup of Muscle? Is this the right way to power all of that? Does this kind of fuse in well to the other side of the attack, or do they need to run more removal, more you know, diverse set of cards than like Cup of Muscle and all these other hand buff commitments really provide? So I wonder if this one kind of gets stuck as the odd man out. Despite looking like a synergy, I do think it's pointed in a bit of an odd direction for the rest of the packages that it might want to support. And ultimately, you know, +2/+1, it's okay, but it doesn't go that far on regular stuff. Like, you need a really specific hit, I think, with like exactly Calamari is the kind of card to pay this off. Maybe Hunter's a better home for this in that case, because Hunter does tend to care a little bit more about those kind of stats. More rush minions, more charge things are a possibility for Hunter, as opposed to like the big defensive taunt thing. So higher chance perhaps in a hand buff Hunter, but I didn't really love the Hunter Tourist card to get into Warrior. So that might really be a limiter in the first place. Is that hand buff Hunter thing going to make any sense at all? I don't really see it. And although this is a better fit, I don't think it's enough to save it. Moving on here to the Draconic Delicacy. This is an 8 mana 6/6. It's a dragon. I guess you're going to eat it? He's like, instead of like a pig getting roasted, it's a dragon. He's got rush and elusive and can only take 1 damage at a time, which that's a pile of stuff and kind of makes me like this card. Just a reminder on elusive, that is the keyword now for can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So, you know, this thing's great at trading into minions because it can only take 1 damage at a time. So, you know, cleaning up a 6/6, you only take 1 damage. That's insane. So, you know, it's a lot of work for a minion based deck here to deal with the Draconic delicacy. It could eat, you know, quite a few things over the course of any given game. And any kind of damage based removal spell, kind of pointless because you can't target it in the first place. Any damage based like minion effect, battle cry sort of thing, kind of useless, only taking 1 damage at a time. So you're really limited to dealing with this effectively. You got like big universal removal, the twisting nethers of the world, right? The big kind of non-targeted spell removals, I guess like a deadly shot sort of thing too. And then you've got like minion based removal too, Amanthul Titan style effects, you know. So there are a handful of ways to get rid of it, particularly as you get later in the game, you know, Reno, etc. There's quite a few of those, but there could be gaps where this just kind of sticks around, you know, and does some work and cleans up a lot of boards. The question is, are those gaps gonna be big enough, and what kind of deck can afford to run this into those gaps? Does this play nicely with hand buffs is another question. Like, obviously, the more health it has, the more, you know, trades or pings or whatever it takes to deal with this. Hopefully your opponent doesn't have some arcane missile-y style stuff to deal with it. I don't know, man. I think it's just a little too high cost to fit into those gaps personally. Like, I think at 8, you're getting into the range of the Renos and the Twisting Nethers, and it may not have time over like multiple turns to really interact with your opponent's board. Because even though, you know, this can eat 6 minions at a base level, you have to attack in 6 times for that to happen. It doesn't have taunt or anything. So the opponent may not do that for you because the 6 attack is not so threatening that they can't just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to leave that for now and just do my thing and hit you in the face or whatever. So I think it's going to feel a little too awkward, but boy, am I close to saying this card's pretty cool. I think it is gonna find its moments where it's just so awkward to deal with and it sticks around forever. But I think the average results probably that it came in a little too late and you just fall behind, they hit you in the face, or alternatively they just clean it up with whatever big late game universal removal tool. So all in all, pretty cool card. I think probably a monster in arena if I had to guess, but standard just a little short of getting there. All right, so next up is All You Can Eat. We teased this one before. 3-mana spell, draw 3 minions of different minion types, which again, you know, this is a dragon. This could fill in a dragon gap, but there's other good dragons too. But anyway, this spell is, I think, really nice. I think this is just good card draw. It's hitting specific targets. You can construct your deck in a way to make sure you're hitting what you want. It plays naturally, of course, into Menagerie deck if you're doing Menagerie stuff with the Boon or whatever other things we've already talked about in this video. That's a great fit there, but I don't think it needs to be in a Menagerie deck to be good. I think this is just a great way to make sure you have your Ziliax in hand. Make him your mech. This guarantees he's either already drawn or you're going to draw him off your All You Can Eat. And there are so many different minion types these days that there's so many great minions that have minion types. You don't necessarily have to like force your way into this sort of thing. It's just like naturally going to happen that you have some stuff you love that happens to have a minion type. Ziliax is the first great example of mini. So yeah, this is the sort of card draw I think Warrior absolutely loves and needs. Hunter honestly could also probably use this just fine. It just looks good. All right, so next up here is Food Fight, and this is kind of a cool card, really cool art, by the way. 3-mana spell, summon a 0/6 entree for your opponent. When it dies, summon a minion from your deck. So you can see here a nice way to like cheat out a big thing. Like, you know, we saw the Monstrosity, we saw the Draconic Delicacy. Those could be great things to potentially cheat out. Of course, there's plenty of other big minions in Hearthstone these days to cheat out. And this is kind of a cool idea. So, you know, you throw this entree in. I don't think you want to like be trading minions into it. I don't think you want to be, number one, because it'd be hard to have small minions because your deck, you probably want to have isolated to big things to make sure the entree doesn't whiff on a small thing. Number two, it's just like a lot to ask. Like 6 health is a lot to trade into. You might need to be trading in and dealing with other minions. So instead of using minions or weapons or whatever to clean this up, you're probably going to want to catch this in either a perfect single target spell, which we are gonna see one, Char. This got leaked earlier and people made fun of this one a lot, and maybe for good reason. Still, we'll talk about it more as we get to it, but this is kind of perfect for your entree, you know, like it cleans it up well, but not really, because the excess damage is only 1, which you know you don't love a 1/1 buff. So kind of a good fit, but not really exactly right. I think you really want to hit entree with a brawl or a sanitize or a wide board cleanup card in the mid game. Now, you know, I mentioned examples there that are kind of 5 mana and 6 mana, which is still a really good, cheap way to cheat out like a 9-drop or an 8-drop, because you probably want to play the brawl anyway, probably want to play the sanitize anyway, so it's not really asking much. The question then becomes, you know, is that gap too big? Like you kind of passed on turn 3, you're waiting until turn 5 maybe to clean things up, or turn 6 with Santa, whatever it is, right? Like, did you fall too far behind for, you know, a big monstrosity to stabilize? Is, you know, does the monstrosity need the taunt hand buff stuff in the mix? Does that kind of break this link? It doesn't have to be monstrosity though. Of course, it can be other awesome big things that don't need hand buffs, but you still have to ask if that gap is too wide, or does that hit consistently? What if you hit your food fight too late and you don't cheat out the big thing? Your deck is like stuffed with all these big things. So there becomes this kind of deck construction restriction where you have to really line things up well. And if things don't hit at the right time, you don't cheat out your big stuff soon enough, you don't hit the brawl on time. There are all these little conditions built into that where you can imagine those scenarios where it lines up perfectly and you do something crazy. You could also imagine those scenarios where you draw your big things early, you don't hit your food fight until late, the brawl misses and things fall apart and you just kind of fall over dead. So a pretty cool card, nice in theory, but I don't know that Warrior has a consistent enough way to build into that, or maybe like consistent enough mid-game cards that remove it. It would be nice if there was like a 4-mana spell that could deal with this really effectively, minus Char. There's like Bellowing Flames. I mean, sure, there's some that look okay, but it's 6 health is just a lot for this one. If it was like 3 or 4 health, I think you'd be in a totally different world for Andre. 3 health would actually be kind of broken, probably. This card would be completely insane. 6 health, though, it does mean you probably need that big cleanup to deal with it, and that might just be too much. So moving on to Char here. This one, again, got leaked earlier. People made fun of it a ton. I do think it's designed probably as a follow-up to Entree, and it's not a crazy one, right? Like, it's basically you're spending 7 mana to cheat out like a big crazy thing, you know, a 10 mana thing, 9 mana thing, whatever. Let's use Monstrosity because it's in the video. It's an easy example, right? That's really good on turn 4. Like, don't get me wrong. And you're happy to spend 7 mana to do that, frankly, right? And you do technically get a little bit of a buff left over as well. So it's like, that's kind of cool in theory. The problem really, I think, becomes that doesn't happen all the time. You don't always have these 2 cards in your opening hand, and then independently, they both just get so much worse. They just really suffer independently, because like Char to me looks like a lot worse, like Helm of Humiliation here for Death Knight. And by the way, Death Knight does have a ton of synergies for this with the hand buff stuff as well. They're kind of similar, but the Helm is always giving 5/5. This does a little extra damage effectively, but sometimes that's going to lead to very little hand buffing. So I don't really think this is any good in like a hand buff world where you're trying to hit hand buff stuff. You know, even like cleaning up a 3/3 and getting 4/4 buffs, like that's okay, but you're not that excited to just like clean up a 3/3 or a 4/4 or whatever on turn 4. It's fine, but it's not the biggest return on investment. So it's like, is this 2-card combo and a big warrior really the only route for these cards? If so, I do worry about that just being really inconsistent, because sometimes you just won't have the Char and your food fight's gonna get stuck, and it's then the Char is gonna feel a lot worse later. You know, it's gonna feel kind of dead in hand too. So it's intriguing. It's one I don't want to write off altogether by any means, because like, man, a monstrosity on turn 4 is pretty gross when that happens. It's just only gonna happen handful of games, you know. Other handful you might just be totally dead and screwed. So I think you got to be really careful with this one. But I do like that this was kind of leaked early and everybody was like, what is this garbage? And you know, food fight was coming to save the day later. Little did we know this kind of 1-2 punch existed as a possibility, but I'm still not sure it gets there. All right, so now let's rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Ham the Hungry is a 4-star card. Line Cook is a 4-star card. Undercooked Calamari is a 4-star card. Monsterosity is a 3-star card. Cup of Muscle is a 2-star card. Draconic Delicacy is a 3-star card. All You Can Eat is a 4-star card. Food Fight is a 2-star card. Char is a 2-star card. Yeah, there you go. That's the warrior set. I'm not sold on the big warrior stuff. I acknowledge it. I see it. I just think it'll end up being a hair too slow. Ham, I think he kind of sucks to play, but he doesn't suck to play in your deck, I bet, with the incoming druid stuff. We'll see you tomorrow. That said, thank you everybody for watching. Share your thoughts on these cards down below. And until next time, game on.